What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Powerhouse Mentality Podcast. I'm your host. I'm Caitlin Kenneth Smith, and today I have a return guest, my client, Sarah Schwallie. And it's funny because last time we had Sarah on the podcast, we spoke all about how she PR'd her marathon by 30 minutes. And now the episode we're going to have today is all about how she went from endurance running to strength training and bodybuilding. So, first of all, Sarah, welcome back to the show. How are you feeling?
Thank you. I'm feeling good.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, give the people like a little bit of a brief intro on who you are and about your fitness journey so far leading up to this point, because you've been on your fitness journey for a while. It's not like, hey, I just decided I'm a runner, but now I'm going to strength train. It's like you've dabbled in a lot of different things.
Yeah, like it's been 13-ish years since I started my fitness journey. And I was one of those people who I started with running because like that's how we lose weight. And yeah, so I just kind of got addicted to it and I got into long distance running and then I tried to do lifting too. Like I was all over the place trying to do several things at the same time.
Yes, that's one of the things that I've learned as your coach is that I have to like take Sarah away from all the shiny looking objects that distract her along the way. Cause the amount of times where, and I think it's almost like comical to this point where I'll get a message, be like, hey, I want to do this. I'm like, okay, wait, what about this that we were doing? Oh, well, can't we do both? Where I feel like along this journey of us working together, you've learned a lot because you're a coach as well of, hey, we can't do everything. We kind of have to have a one focus or, we can have a couple of different focuses, but if you have a couple different things, it's understanding that, hey, we can't be the best in everything, right?
Yeah, and it's just testimony that coaches need coaches because like you keep me from doing everything or
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah, no, I get that because I kind of have that same thing where I'm like, I'm doing CrossFit and I'm trying to become a CrossFit athlete. And then I'll watch like, a Nick Bear vlog on him doing a marathon and him doing high rocks. And I'm like, maybe I'll do that. And it's like, wait, hold on. No, no, no. Stay true to your mission. And that's why I think it's so important to have a powerful why and a passion for what you're doing. So
Yeah.
last year at this time, you were still doing running, correct? I can't remember
I
timeline.
I think I was just starting to train for the Carmel Marathon in April, for April. So yeah, I think we started early January.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has been quite a bit of time since you've actually really trained as an endurance athlete. So tell me about how that shift actually happened because I know like one day you came to me and you were like, "Hey, I know you wanted to do the Boston Marathon one day." And it's like we were so focused on that and then it was like, why don't we take off a little bit of time to do some strength training just to become a stronger runner because we knew that like, hey, we're going to be able to prevent injuries, we're going to be faster, we're going to be better if we're stronger. But then it turned into something completely different that I never anticipated. And you falling in love with strength training.
Yeah, because leading up to the marathon that I did in April, that would be my fourth marathon in 12 or 2 years. And my body was so tired. And I remember that race being awful. Like it sucked. I cried
Yeah, I
and
remember that.
I came out of it and I'm just like, I need to take a break from it.
Hmm.
I'll get back to it in the fall. And, we were going to run a half marathon together.
Yeah, we
Um,
were. I'm glad we
but
didn't.
yeah, yeah, me too. But we nixed that idea and just started getting into strength training. And I just kind of fell in love with lifting and I did not miss running much and I still don't.
Yeah. And I think I want to go back and I want to highlight is that the Caramel Marathon? The Carmel, how do you pronounce it?
Caramel. There's
Sorry,
no extra A.
I'm from New York, so like I can't say that word anyway, apparently, according to my Southern husband. But um Carmel Marathon. I want to go back to that because again, the last time we had you on the podcast, you were celebrating such a big high coming off of like a 30-minute PR from a marathon. And then you go into this next marathon, we had a pretty aggressive goal. I think we wanted to do another like 20 or 30-minute PR, correct?
I think so. I think I was going for like a 4:15 or like
Yeah.
15, 20 minutes off. Yeah.
And the thing is, like, we talk all about on this podcast and you hear it all the time on social media like, hey, if you work hard towards something, it'll happen. Yes, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen the first time. And I think I want to highlight this because you worked your ass off during that marathon prep, you know,
Mhm.
and you ran the marathon and it wasn't the way that you wanted it to go. And I remember that day so vividly because I remember I was working out and I was having a shitty workout and I get a text from you saying like, "Hey, I can't do this. I'm struggling. Like this is not going well. Like I'm cramping. Like all these things." And then my husband at the time, or he's still my husband. My husband at the time was also doing an endurance race that he did not train for, that he was kind of just like pushed into, and he was like dying himself. However, he didn't prepare. He didn't fuel himself properly. He had like an uncrustable before he ran and called it good. But you put in so much preparation and then on race day to have it kind of not go the way that you wanted to. I want to unpack that a little bit. Like, how did it go? How did it feel? You know?
Well, it was crazy. So October 2023 is when I had that PR. And the next race, like I went to like, this is awful. Like I can't do this.
Mhm.
So I mean, that
Mhm.
just goes to show like you can have really one good day and then the next be like completely awful. So it was hard and I never wanted to quit so bad, but I knew how much work I'd put into it. I'm like, what else am I gonna do? I might as well finish cross the finish line.
Yeah, because even if it wasn't the outcome that you wanted it to be, you finished it. And that should be something that you're proud of because you overcame that moment of wanting to quit so many times because a marathon is not a short race, right?
Yeah.
It's a long race and it's something where you're going to have a lot of highs and lows. I've never ran one, but I've spoken to you enough about it to know that, like, hey, like you might feel awesome miles 1 through 10, then all of a sudden 11 through 12 you want to die, but then you're good again. So it's highs and lows, and you didn't quit on yourself despite how hard it was. Now when it comes to that race, do you feel like, was it just an off day, or like did anything specifically go wrong? Because I know training wise we had a couple of amazing workouts leading up to it where it gave you the confidence to be like, I'm going to hit this goal because I was able to hold these paces. Do you feel like it was a fueling thing? Was it a stress thing? Or do you think it was just, you don't know?
I think it was a number of factors. I think a lot of it had to do with the weather. It was
Mm,
really humid that day.
yeah.
Um, and the other thing with this race that I hadn't experienced with others is there wasn't as much crowd. It was a lot of
Mm,
trails and back stuff. So like there's so much room for mental gains to happen. And like you had nothing but your earbuds and just to move forward.
mhm. And I think ever since that race, we really have focused a lot more on like the psychological and the mental side of racing and just like endurance and just working out in general. Because yes, maybe you weren't running marathons, but then after that, you went into doing more functional training and doing more Spartan race training. And I think a lot of that training, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've learned a lot mentally on like not being afraid to fail or not wanting to quit and being able to push your body to new limits.
Yeah, I actually forgot I did that Spartan.
Yeah, I
I
know. We just threw that in there. Well, it was like
yeah.
we came off of the marathon. You were like, I want to try something differently. And you had the opportunity to do a Spartan race. So it was like, hey, why don't we get into a little bit of like functional training, more like CrossFit style training? I hate how people like say CrossFit training. It's like strength and conditioning. That's literally what it is, if done correctly. So we were doing more strength and conditioning, and these were things that you never really did before. Like we threw in like assault bike, we did burpees, we did box jumps, we faced fears with box jumps, you
Yeah.
know, which, let's tell that story while we're on it. Because I know
Oh,
that a lot of people are on that, like, box jumps are scary. I've almost died on a box jump before. I still have a big ass scar on my leg 3 years later. Sarah did it too and caught it on film.
yeah. I'm like rubbing my shin just thinking about it because it was so awful. We were prepping for a race and it was on one of those functional strength conditioning days. And you had me doing seated box jumps. So I would go from a bench to a box.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one, like I was a little bit shaky, but I made it up. And it was just like the next rep or so where I just like took that shin and smacked it right against the box. and I had to
Nice
get
little
stitches
wooden
for the
box
first time.
too.
Yes.
Yeah, geez. Well,
Yep.
there you go. Nice little experience, but it was something that you were really afraid to do for a while, and then it was like, "Hey, we gotta face this fear because the only thing holding you back here is you." The amount of times where you've done a box jump in the past and you haven't hurt yourself, you know?
Yeah. I can do them now, but they're still just as scary
Oh
every
yeah, of
time.
course. And I think one thing that helps me because I've gone through a lot with like my back over the past 8 months where I've had like moments in my workouts where I almost go into a panic attack. So I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so afraid. Oh, I feel a little bit of tightness." And I think one of the biggest things that my coach said to me that helps is like, "Hey, if you don't ever take the risk, you're never going to feel the reward." So like, yeah, sometimes in training you're going to have to take the risk, but if you focus on really doing things appropriately, you're going to be okay and you need to trust that. And you'll never see the reward unless you do.
Yeah. And if not, just go to the doctor and get the
Yeah.
stitches. It's
Yeah, just
fine.
get the stitches. You're
You'll
gonna be
survive.
okay. You're gonna live. Yeah, exactly. So that we'll call it like a defining moment when you finished that marathon, you were like, "I need a break." Like, in your head, did you think like, "I wanna quit running," or was it more like, "I think I just need some time off?"
At that time, it was just I need to take some time off and just like I got to the point where I didn't really like running because
Yeah.
all I was doing was training.
Mhm.
And I missed the enjoyment of just going out and getting a few miles in.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people probably find themselves in that area because lately, especially, I don't know about you, but I see it all over social media where everybody's kind of getting into running now. It's like kind of trending, but
Mhm.
everybody's just running to run like these paces and to run a specific race, which I think it's great to train for something specifically because it gives you drive, it gives you inspiration, it gives you something to do. And it gives you fulfillment. But there's nothing wrong with just, hey, I love running and I want to just get out there and just put a couple miles on my feet and use it as like a way to clear my head and find some mental clarity. And I know that it started that way well, originally it started like, hey, I want to lose weight, let me run. And then once you started educating yourself, you realize, okay, maybe that's not the best approach, but you still love to run. And then when you started to compete so much without any long-term breaks, it was just like go, 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 go. It became a little bit too much, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So now with strength training and bodybuilding, the complete other side of the spectrum from endurance training. How tell me how the experience has been for you and like different approaches that you've taken for somebody who might be like, "Hey, I kind of want to get into strength training, but I'm a little bit afraid or intimidated by it."
So I have experience with strength training over the
Mhm.
years.
Yeah.
But it changes things a little bit when you have a goal in mind. So, like, I've had to approach moves with this beginner mindset of, okay, the mind muscle connection, like, what am I actually trying to achieve here?
Mhm.
So that's been the biggest thing, and just like trying to lift heavier
Mhm.
because you're not going to get where you want to go lifting lightweight. So really pushing myself past that point of I can't move this weight to I'm going to have to.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that a lot of people find themselves stuck there when it comes to strength training. I mean, I know you're a coach, so you can probably relate to this. Is like how many times have you heard a client say like, "Hey, I'm doing these workouts, but I'm not seeing results." And you have to ask them like the hard question, are you pushing yourself hard enough during your training sessions? And for a lot of women specifically, I hate to point us out, but this is just how it is. We almost fear to lift too heavy because we're afraid to get injured or we're afraid to get too bulky, which is not going to happen unless you're taking steroids. So don't worry about that. But did you ever deal with that kind of a fear like, hey, I don't want to hurt myself or I don't want to get bulky or anything of that nature?
So as far as like the hurting myself only with the box jumps, but honestly, I'm not really fearful of getting hurt, or too bulky, but like one thing that kind of psychs me out is when I get to looking at bodybuilders and like
Hmm.
seeing their size and I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that big.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, a lot of women find themselves there, even women who aren't doing bodybuilding but are like, "Hey, I wanna get lean and toned," and somebody says, "Hey, you need to lift weights in order to do that," and they are like, "Whoa." Immediately, they think of, like, the big bodybuilder on a magazine who's probably taking unbelievable amounts of steroids and hormones and eating so much food. People don't understand how much food you truly need to eat in order to maintain that kind of a body, that maintain that kind of muscle. So I think for a lot of women and maybe even for yourself, it's like, hey, I don't want to get there, but you have to understand the amount of hard work and dedication it would take to actually get to that. And if you don't want it, it's not like it's something that's going to accidentally happen. I think that a lot of people think that, like, oh no, I'm going to touch a weight and I'm going to accidentally become giant. I wish. I've been trying to get super muscular for a while, and man, it is hard. It's kind of like the same thing as somebody trying to lose weight. It's hard. It's not as easy as people think it's going to be. But when it comes to your strength training, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had with this shift? Because I know somebody who goes from an endurance training background to going from like, hey, we're not doing any sort of endurance training really at all. How has that been for you, not just physically, but mentally?
Um, Mentally, sometimes I feel like it's not even that I don't feel like I'm not doing enough, but it's like, am I doing this right? Because
Mm,
I've got that perfectionism in me and I want to make sure that I'm doing it perfect. And like, you're not going to, there's going to be a couple reps that just don't look great.
mm-hmm,
So that's one thing I'm working on. And then it's just finding that mixture between like pushing myself hard enough with good form, um, and getting it right.
mm-hmm.
I don't know, there's a lot of back and forth and uncertainty for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing with bodybuilding, especially if you're doing it to compete in bodybuilding, is that you have to understand that it's different from just strength training, where you're just moving weight and you're trying to get like the biggest numbers possible. And maybe sometimes you're not really connecting with the muscle. And that's something you spoke about earlier, is that mind muscle connection. And what I like to say to people is like, hey, our intent right now is to build muscle. So what we need to do is we need to act as if we're sculpting the muscle. So when we're training, we need to think of it as like, hey, am I using the muscle that I'm meant to use? So if you're doing a lat pull down and you don't feel it in your back at all, well, okay, we need to look at, maybe I'm using too much weight, maybe my form's off, maybe my technique's off. And those are things that we need to tweak in order to make it more advantageous for what you're doing so you can get more bang for your buck in your training.
Yeah, and that's something we even talked about too, because a few weeks ago I hurt my trap
Hmm.
on a bench press, and it's like, well, that shouldn't be hurting. So you kind of worked with me to help me fix that and throwing in some correctional exercises too, so we can adjust.
Hmm.
So it's great that we can talk along the way and make adjustments.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things to having a coach too, is like, I tell clients all the time is like, if you feel like something isn't right, send me a video. Like, let's break it down. Maybe I'm not there with you in person, but I can be as close as possible with you, you know?
Yeah.
So you started the strength training, but what really made you interested in like saying, I want to step on stage and do bodybuilding? I know that you're a competitive person, so I kind of feel like that's really where it came down. It's like, hey, I really like this strength training. How can I compete in it? But, there's other ways to compete other than bodybuilding. Like you could have done a powerlifting competition or an Olympic lifting competition. But what you drove you more towards stepping on stage or wanting to step on stage? Because you haven't done it yet, but we're getting there.
Right. Well, it's something that's always kind of intrigued me over the
Yeah.
last few years. And like the more I get into the fitness world and lifting and all that, like I'm starting to see how kind of cool and badass it really is. So um, I'm like, man, I would really love to work towards that because as a long distance runner. Like I'm always looking to that next race to run. And it's like I have to have something to keep me moving forward. And I'm like, bodybuilding would be cool.
Hmm.
So, but the thing I ran into is like all of the divisions, like the bikini, like I didn't feel comfortable in the posing, or like I didn't want to get like too big as some of the other divisions. But then I actually saw the fitness division, which is the one where they have like gymnastics and dance routines, like as part of their judging. And I'm like, I love dance, I love gymnastics, but that seems like a farther out goal. So I
Hmm.
had that like on my vision board and like something like I'm going to work towards that eventually. But then at the end of the year, they came out with this fit model division. And I'm looking at the model, which is basically 2015 bikini.
Right.
I'm looking at, I'm like, I'm not that far off from there. Like, they're only, I could do that this year. So that's where I'm like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. And I think that so many people fall into this category where they see something that they want to do, but they feel so intimidated by it, like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not going to be able to look like that, that they talk themselves out of even trying to do it. And even before the fit model division was created, you still were like, I'm going to do this. Like, even though you didn't feel like, oh, I wasn't quite there yet, you said, I'm not there yet, but that doesn't mean that I can't get there. And I think that's such an incredible mindset that you need to recognize that you have, because not a lot of people have that. Most people never get to live the life that they want to or do the things that they want to because they never even start trying because they talk themselves out of it.
Yeah. And like, I can't wait to sign up for the race or oh my God,
Uh,
not the race.
She's on autopilot. I'm
You
always
can't
just
take the
signing up for
runner out of
races.
me. um, the show that I want to do, like as soon as I can sign up, I'm going to, because like every day I'm like, do I actually want to do this? Do I really
Yeah.
want to do? I mean, every day I have to talk myself into continuing to follow it.
Yeah. And why do you feel like you're kind of going through that every day where it's like, do I still want to do this? Is it because the training, like you miss running, or is it because the training's hard, or is it because the diet's hard, or is it just because you have that doubt in yourself?
I think it's the doubt. It's
Hmm.
unscary because it's uncharted territory. Like I've
Yeah.
never done this before. I've never put myself out there like this.
Yeah. No, definitely. And the fear of the unknown is real for most people. And I know, like, no matter how strong you are, everybody still has those fears.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, are you going to take action regardless of the fear? And
Yeah.
the answer for you is yes, because every day you have that fear and you have that doubt. However, you never quit.
Yep.
So, what keeps you going then? What's your motivation or your drive here?
I think it's just making sure that I do what I say I'm going to do and keep the promises to myself.
Hmm. So, this is all
And
for you then?
well, no. I
Wrong.
mean, it,
I think it
it's
should
it's
be.
twofold. It is. It is for me because it's something I want to do, but at the same time too, it's just a way to show people that like you can do whatever you want to do. You
Hmm.
just have to take the steps to get there.
Yeah. So, it's not like, oh, I'm doing it just for me, but I'm also doing it to show people like, hey, you can do anything that you want to do if you set your mind to it, rather than what a lot of people do, where it's like, I'm kind of doing this for me, but I'm more doing it because I want to prove people wrong, or I want to like do it for like the recognition. So I
Yeah.
think you're doing it for the absolute right reasons, where a lot of people, when they do bodybuilding specifically, they do it because they are like, oh, I really want to look like that. And they don't realize how unhealthy it truly can be to be there, especially like those people who step on stage, they don't look like that year round, because it would be literally on the cusp of death if they were, or they would be completely messed up.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people who know me know that like they know me as this person who's confident and I'm a runner and she's never had to lose weight or like any of that. So like showing people the beginning stages of something, it just helps me to relate so much more.
Yeah, especially because they don't see the whole journey. Like, they don't see everything that you've been through up into this point. They just see the outcome and they think, oh, I can never get to that point because I'm so far back. And it's like, no, no, no. I started where you were at too. The only
Yeah.
difference is like now I've been able to earn the confidence and I've been able to earn the discipline through doing the things that I don't want to do because I know that they're going to take me to where I want to be.
Yeah.
So now the show that you sent me is in October, right?
It
And we're
is.
saying this now here on the podcast because you said like every day I want to sign up for it. Well, okay, I'm holding you accountable to it because now it's on the internet, right? So, what is your game plan going into it, right? So, what are we? Well, I guess I kind of already know, but tell the people like, what are we doing now, and kind of where are we going?
So right now I'm following your training as prescribed, and
Very
giving it
good.
my all in the gym. And then nutrition wise, I'm in a deficit, which for the first time in like, God, probably 2 years or so, because I was in a surplus or maintenance, but never trying to lose fat.
Yeah.
Um, so being in a deficit, trying to lose, I have my posing session, my first posing session coming up, which is so nerve-wracking, but it's going to go great. Um, and yeah, so just following the daily steps to get where I need to go.
Yeah. So right now we went into a cut starting on January 1st because we were planning it for a while to see kind of how her body responds. Because like you said, we've been in like maintenance or more of a surplus, depending on how you look at it, because you were training so much volume with running that maybe it wasn't a surplus, but it was just we were fueling for performance, right? We're still fueling for performance, but in a different way, while also keeping in mind, hey, we're trying to cut a little bit of body fat to see what we can reveal. We're going to be here for about 8 weeks, maybe come in and out of maintenance depending on how we do. And then we'll kind of go from there, maybe into a little bit of a reverse heading into when we would prep for the show so we can get your metabolism in the best spot possible. So that way you don't have to cut down to extreme lows in order to get stage ready.
Yeah.
So the last couple questions kind of have to come around the mindset of it, right? Because there's a mindset behind training and what you're doing and building strength and progress and stuff like that. What keeps you going when you want to quit?
Well, I've told too many people.
That's one way. And that's the beauty of accountability, honestly. Like you laugh at it, but it's like, hey, if you put it out there, like you're definitely more likely to hold on to it. That's why I
Yeah.
recorded a podcast episode with my 2025 goals to be like, oops, I now am not the only one who knows about these things.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest reasons. And then just showing up for myself and other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And other people being like your family or being like your clients or your friends,
Um, Everybody.
all the people.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what advice do you have for somebody who is maybe in endurance and they're listening to this year? They're like, you know what? I have been kind of feeling the same way about running, maybe a little bit burnt out, or like I wanted to try something different. What kind of advice do you have for them?
I would say just do it. Like, it's okay for your goals to change. So just do it anyway and find somebody to help you. A coach helps like huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, especially if you're transitioning from doing something that you kind of know very well, like endurance or like running that you've done for so long, and then getting into bodybuilding where, like you said, I've done strength training, like you've always done it. It's just like maybe I haven't been doing it the right way, or maybe the programming wasn't 100% where it needed to be for what I have, what I want to do now. And I think a lot of it comes down to two, and I know that you've said this, is like fall in love with the process, because it doesn't matter what the like so many people fixate on the outcome and they try to fall in love with the outcome, but then the journey becomes miserable, and the journey is where you learn the most.
Yeah, because if I get on that stage and I win and all that, but I hated the whole time, like what was the point of it?
Yep, absolutely. So what are some future goals then that you have for yourself after you do this bodybuilding? So like aside from the bodybuilding show, like kind of what's on your mind? Because I know you're always thinking ahead.
Yeah, so I'm trying to not, I'm doing this new thing where I don't think too far ahead.
I like that.
Um,
I support this.
but Boston was always a dream of mine, and now I'm not so sure that like it's even on the radar.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's for some people, maybe not for me, but I could see myself totally like getting swallowed up by this world and just wanting to do more shows. And I don't know, maybe become a posing coach myself or something. I don't know.
Yeah. You don't know. And that's the cool thing about life, is like you never know what direction it's going to be in, but you can direct it the best that you can with the choices that you make on a daily basis. So you saying, you know what, I'm going to take a break from running and I'm going to see what else is out there. Because I think for a while you were like, I'm a runner. I identify as a runner. That is all that I am. And now you're like, no, I can be whatever the fuck I want to be.
Yeah, it's your life. You write the story. Just do what you want to do.
Absolutely. And I love that. Now, last thing before we go, is there anything that you would say to somebody out there who is struggling to get started on their fitness journey in general because of the fear? Because I know that a lot of people who listen to this, they're like on the cusp of like, I need to do something, but they're not sure where to go or what to do. And they have this fear. And I know that like, hey, that isn't directly what we're talking about today. I know you're a coach yourself and you help people. What is something that you would tell somebody who is like afraid to get started, but really has something that they want to accomplish?
I would say the best thing to do is just get it on paper. Start with like what your ultimate goal is, and then just reverse engineer that. Be like, what are the small steps that I have to make every single day in order to get there?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think that you have to have a GPS. It's almost like a GPS, right? If I have no idea where I'm going, then how am I going to map out the directions to get there? But if I know where I want to go or have a pretty good idea of where I want to go, then I can say, okay, if I want to become that version of Sarah, what does that Sarah do on a daily basis? What are her daily habits? What does she do? What choices does she make? And then replicate that because you almost have to act as if.
Yeah, and find that person who you do aspire to be like and just ask them for help.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally know that like if somebody comes to me for help, like I cannot wait to give them the wealth of knowledge that I've gathered over my years. So like ask people, they want to
Yeah.
help you. You
It's
just
so
have to
true
ask.
though. People are so intimidated to ask people who are further ahead in them in life, but like I know if anybody asks me like anything about a podcast or anything about coaching or client stuff, I'm like all in to help you because I want to see you succeed too because I know that if I were in that same position like I used to be, I'd be like wanting all that information too and how helpful it could be.
Yeah. I mean, I would have saved a lot of time if I just asked for help 13 years ago.
That's real. You save a lot of time by learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, then, this has been an incredible episode. I'm excited for the journey ahead for you. And, we're going to get strong as fuck. We're going to get cut and we're going to get on stage. And we're going to do some crazy shit. You excited?
Yes. I'm so pumped.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please share it and go out and do one thing that's going to take you one step closer to where you want to be.